Years ago, John Stossel, when he was one of the hosts of 2020, did this remarkable and eye-opening report on race. In it, based on the latest scientific research, he argued that we are all inclined to be racist. That doesn't mean that we're consciously or overtly racist, but that we have this deeply embedded instinct to be aware of difference, of otherness. That means when we meet somebody for the first time, immediately, within seconds, we pick up on how they are different from us. And obviously one of the things that we're going to see first is what race they are. This is the product of natural selection. It's a survival instinct. And in bygone periods, it was absolutely essential to survival. It was a difference between life and death. Being able to pick up on how people were different and then form alliances with people who were like us is what enabled us to survive, our ancestors to survive. But tragically, that's left us with a tribal instinct, a deeply embedded, hardwired tribal instinct. Tragically, it's given us this us versus them way of thinking, mentality, dichotomy of thought pattern. Tragically, it's been disastrous for modern race relations. Dramatically, in that report, Stossel is able to show how intuitively and immediately we're able to pick up on difference. Within seconds, people are able to note in their heads that the differences in another person that they've encountered for the first time. And then, and this happens mostly at the subconscious level, this research finds, then they're able to kind of classify the person, categorize the person, and decide very quickly whether they're one of us or one of them. And this doesn't happen just with race. It happens with all kinds of other differences. It doesn't matter what kind of group you put us in, we will notice the differences among us. Even in a group where we're homogeneous, where we all look alike and talk alike and think alike, we'll still pick up on the differences. I can attest to this from firsthand experience. If you put a group of white male firefighters, Irish American firefighters in the same room, we will very quickly figure out what's different about us and form cliques based on that, whether that's who's the more aggressive firefighters or who is more loyal or something else. Last week, based on something Jesus says in John chapter 9, after healing the blind man, I suggested that the reason that things like the despicable murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer, the reason those things keep happening is because we are so blind to our racial biases. Societally, systemically, we are blind to our racial biases. Stossel's report seems to verify that scientifically. It seems that this is not just a policing problem, it's a societal problem. It's a human problem. There are many wonderful, heroic police officers. Most of them are wonderful and heroic people out there, but they're subject to the same biases the rest of us are. Last week, I also suggested that Jesus gives us a way forward in what he says there in John chapter 9. And the way forward is so simple. All we have to do is to admit our blindness, is to admit that we have biases that we can't see, that we are normally not aware of. And if we come clean with that to him, he promises to heal us. He promises to enable us to see. He promises a way forward where we can finally overcome the systemic racism that plagues us in America. By the way, that also seems to be the conclusion Stossel came to in his report. In that report, he concluded by saying that the way around this instinct, this hardwired instinct that we have through natural selection to notice difference, the way around that is to be vigilant, to be careful, to be aware of that, of how it operates at the subconscious level in us. And when we bring it up to the surface, when we're vigilant with it, we can then be aware of some of the attitudes and behaviors that we have that tend to be biased or racist. One of the things that I appreciate more and more every day about Christianity is how realistic it is, how it is so honest about the human condition, the predicament that we find ourselves in, because that truly is the only way that we can address the problem of the human condition and overcome it and transform it. Traditionally, this has been known as original sin. It's the doctrine of original sin, which says that we have this self-absorption. We are radically inclined to be self-absorbed, to think about our own preservation, and that inclines us to be indifferent towards other people, to be blind to other people. And that teaching is unique to Christianity. That awareness, I think, is what we need most right now. That to acknowledge that this is a spiritual problem at its root, at its heart. That the systemic racism is a spiritual problem that is going to require transformation of our hearts, of each and every person's, individual's hearts. And what Jesus says in John chapter 9, he is leading us to being able to respond to this whole thing with humility, especially those of us who do have white privilege, to respond with humility and admit that we are blind to our biases. And that means that we need to listen, to truly and really listen and try to understand one another. In next week's blog, I'll share a powerful experience I had where my eyes were open to my own racial biases, and where the format provided a way forward, a way to learn from that and to overcome them. So, what do you think about Stossel's report? Do you think that we as human beings are inclined to be racist? Do you think that's part of the human condition, the brokenness of our condition? Let me know what you think. You can go to the Contact EJ page of the Raising Jesus website and leave your comments there. I continue to pray that we will be able to have the courage to face the ways that we are biased, the ways that this systemic racism plagues us, and the wisdom, that we have the humility and wisdom to let God enable us to see.